doing I absolutely love doing work with Jewish Council for the Aging. I really do. I've done a bunch so far, and I'm glad to see you here. I have another qualification that Jody didn't mention, and that is that although I haven't been impacted by DOGE except um, watching the news, which I avoid at all costs, but I used to work for NIH for about 10 years, National Institutes of Health. My husband was a 30-year employee at USAID. And so we spend a lot of our time feeling very heartbroken about what's going on in the world. But that's not going to help you. So why am I not?
Justin, people are saying that they don't have access to their cameras. So I don't know if if it's possible that they all can we let them be on camera?
Yeah,
Okay, we'll
give me
work
one
that.
second. Let me see.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead, Ann.
So at some point, if you see poll results, just pop
That should
in.
be fixed now, by the way.
Okay, thank you. You all can.
Great. So anyway, I haven't seen that many names I know, but for all of you, I'd like to welcome you today. Interviewing is actually I think a really important aspect of the job search, and there really are tricks to the trade, or at least ways you can prepare and do better. Um, one thing I'd like to, or something I'd like to begin with is the fact that there's quite a bit of good news about being interviewed. First of all, when someone calls you for an interview, they already think you're qualified for the job. So it's sort of a misunderstanding that people think they've got to go in and really sell themselves, when actually the employer's already decided that you have enough that's worth it to take their time to bring you in. So they already think you're qualified, and in fact want to know whether or not the you they see in front of you on Zoom, in person, whatever, is what they saw on the resume or the application materials. Another thing is, and if you've heard me talk before, you know that I fully believe this, and that is that interviews are really two-way. You can decide if the role is right for you by being at the interview, and you also have an opportunity to impress them with your experience, your ideas, your knowledge, your passion, etc. Also, for the 50 plus in the crowd, of which I am certainly one, uh, we hear so much about age discrimination, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but there's discrimination against young people too. Have you heard anybody complaining about Generation Z lately? But anyway, there are positive stereotypes for older people, and that is they're trustworthy, they're stable, they're mature, they have good judgment, they're wise. So these are also there too. And that's if you're in an interview situation, those are the things that are worth emphasizing. Another thing is for those of you who've been doged, I honestly will tell you that I cannot even imagine how painful this has been. I do have friends who've been living through this, but the truth is that you are not fired. And so if somebody ever says to you, were you ever fired from a job? You were not. I do understand there were mix-ups and paperwork glitches and stuff about, with unemployment and that kind of stuff. But the point that you were not fired for performance, no matter what the bloody politicians said. Another thing is that you have transferable skills. And those are the skills if you've taken any classes at all since this DOGE stuff started happening, you probably heard about transferable skills. I'll talk about those in a little more in a moment, but those are the skills that you have because of the work you're doing now, the work you did before, that actually can be moved, that you can take with you and do a fabulous job somewhere else. And the other thing is also good news, you're well qualified to move ahead in your career. It's not going to be easy, I imagine. The one job I got that was really, really easy to get was awful. So, it's probably worth the work. But you really have a lot to offer, I think, with the way people are being treated in the media and interpersonally. It's hard to remember that, but I suggest you do. Of course, I don't have to tell you it's a tough job market. It's a tough job market. Another thing is what I hear from my career services colleagues is that employers are taking a long, long time to hire. And I'm not just talking about security clearances. People are getting interviewed from everybody with everybody from the CEO to the person who cleans the building. It that's an exaggeration, of course, but it's very employers are very risk averse at the moment, and they're doing lots of interviews and pretty much everything they can think of to make themselves sure that the person they're hiring is going to work out. And the impact of that is takes a long time, of course, and it's probably very wearing, but be aware also that that's what's happening out there. Um, I don't have to tell you that there are negative stereotypes of federal employees. I was a Fed, my husband was a Fed, my father was a Fed, my nephew is a Fed, and I don't know any of them who are lazy, sitting at their desks all day drinking coffee, etc. They're all very, very hardworking, and it's a tough political time when we're hearing awful things about people we know that aren't true. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Um, we're going to talk about uh, interviewing. And I've broken this into four parts, but I just kind of did that to have a way to break things apart. This is not in stone. You can do some of the things that I say are planning in the preparing phase, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a way for me to introduce some of these things. I haven't seen the poll yet, but I'm imagining that some of you have not been on an interview in a while. And so that's just my hypothesis. And I will tell you that some things about interviewing are pretty much exactly the same as they were when you interviewed for your first job. And then there are things that are much, much different. Obviously, we didn't have the technology or, more important, the access to information that we do now before going into an interview. If we were trying to research a company before, you might go to the library, you might look it up in the newspaper or read a business press or something like that. But, at our fingertips now, we have lots of information. So obviously, when I say things are the same and some are different, the things that are the same are that you need to prepare. You need to be ready to answer questions and that sort of thing. Um, Another thing that I want to share with you today is about artificial intelligence and how it can help you with your job search. Um, and that is, I'm not Hear me when I say that I'm not telling you to let ChatGPT or any of the others write your resume. Absolutely not. I'm not telling you that or your LinkedIn profile. That's not what I'm saying. What I find good and what my career services colleagues are finding is that you can have access to some alternative points of view, informations, a brighter, wider spectrum of information and that kind of thing. But I did hear about somebody, it was a young person who was sitting on the phone in an interview and having her getting the answers to the questions on the phone. I can't even tell you how much I'm against that. So, so I'm not saying to let the robots do it. I'm saying let them help you. But most important about that is to be careful. To be careful, do not put your personal information, personally identifiable information into the chat, not your name, certainly not your social security number, et cetera, et cetera. And you can still use these tools, you just can be anonymous, and I suggest you do that. And then, as we said before, there are handouts because I can't see little tiny, tiny writing on the screen probably any better than you can, but I'm just talking about myself. So for some of the things that I'm going to put on the screen, I put them in the folder so you can either look at them later, pull them up when I'm talking, etc. So any questions about that? Oh, I did want to mention my little saying here. I do have a through line for today's presentation, which is today's preparation is tomorrow's success. This is all about being a boy or a Girl Scout, well, it's really the Boy Scouts that say be prepared. So That's a big theme of what I'm going to be talking about today. So let's begin with why employers hire people. Now, I know this seems kind of simplistic, but in a lot of ways, this is the core of the matter. And that is that, well, we may be thinking of an employer as somebody, give me a job, please. From the employer's point of view, it's an investment. They spend money, they spend time training, they spend time recruiting, they have, all sorts of there's a lot of work involved to hiring somebody. So it's a good idea to remember what the motivators are. Why are they going through all this? And one, of course, we're talking about, I think many of you are public sector, so the making money is probably not the deal, but saving money is a motivator, solving specific problems. My colleagues at NIH were solving health problems, and in other places, they're solving all sorts of problems. Everywhere, nonprofit, for-profit organizations need to improve their work and their processes. Private sector or business oriented to be more competitive, both public and private. And I'm using public, private loosely. It could be anybody that's not government from my point of view. Build relationships in industry. We certainly did that a lot at NIH. Oh, by the way, I'm not a scientist, I'm a web person. Um, and also, all kinds of employers are trying to raise awareness about their organizations and their products and the services. And of course, in a business or private sector, they're trying to increase sales. So, any questions about that?
Yeah, oops,
Yeah,
Anne.
yeah.
Yes, people were wondering what the difference on your between what is the difference between those on the question about AI? What is the difference between those on the slide? Which is the best to use? I think you had.
Uh, I hate to say the answer to that is it depends. But there are a whole bunch of them, and they're the popular ones are ChatGPT, Claude, Google. I will tell you, I will go to the end of the earth to get Microsoft Copilot off my computer. But I can't say the best. Some of them are known to be better writers. And I say this knowing that I just told you I don't want it to write your resume. But it's really, most of them let you try them for free. And that's my suggestion. The deal is if you're using them for free, you can get kicked off because you've used, enough of the service. They make it available to the paying people. I have a ChatGPT paid account, and the other ones I use for free. And but one of the things I will suggest later is that you always check more than one. If you have a question or something, check more than one. But I can't tell you the best because it's like everything else. It's what meets your needs better. But the people I know, Perplexity is great for research, but not so much for writing. So, and also there are reviews all over the place these days. And take a look, see. But it is really fun. And it took me a little while. I was intimidated, and I won't say I'm an expert by any means, but I've grown very fond of them. Any other questions before I go on?
No, I think that's good.
Mhm. Okay. So for many of you, and I don't know how many are still employed and wanting to get out of a government situation or are already out and looking or any of those things, but for anybody who's going to make a change, these points that I'm going to make really are relevant. And that is that for any career change, including the one you may be doing now, it's important for you to learn the culture, the language, and the priorities of the occupation you're targeting. People needed to do that when they came to the government, when you did. Another thing is to know your transferable skills, and I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. And then also and this is the hard part, but most important, and this is any career change, you need to be able to talk about the things you've done, your actions, your accomplishments, your experience, your successes in terms that your next employer will both understand and understand that using the skills you got will help them do whatever it is they're trying to do. And that takes work. It takes work. So, So I just did this little list, and you all can disagree with me about this. But the when we're looking at private sector, and I'm thinking private nonprofit too to a certain extent, but private sector, I'm mostly thinking in terms of business. And business, the emphasis is on efficiency and profitability. They're there to make money. That's what they do. And so there's an emphasis on results, results, results. They want a competitive advantage in the marketplace, and the focus is on customer satisfaction and financial performance. The difference is in government that we're generally in government out to accomplish a mission. We have a goal, often for the good of the people, and I'm not going into what's going on now, but that's that we have a mission, we have a goal, we have a societal goal or something. And it might be in the government collecting taxes, for example, or I'm so familiar with NIH, so I'm thinking NIH, but any government agency. We also, again, current times excluded, of course, we tend to emphasize democratic processes and legal authority. And that is part of your job as a government employee in many cases. Um, there's a focus on understanding rules and regulations and legislation and that kind of stuff. And also a focus on public service and the community benefit. So coming from my husband was USAID, I was worked at NIH. Those were jobs where really what our reasons for coming into the office were to help other people overseas, help other people. We weren't there trying to make a profit. But it's worth it as you're thinking about going into a different place and a different kind of an organization to remember that the orientations do tend to be different. I also worked for a contractor, which was a business. And so, to a certain, a government contractor is not quite as businessy as other businesses, but they're there to make a profit. They're there to make a profit. By helping the government accomplish its mission. So, questions about that? Okay. This is one of my first teeny tiny. Um, oh, I see that Anne raised her hand. Anne with an E. I'm Anne without an E. Um,
If people have questions, please put them in chat and I will address them to Anne so that she can address your questions. So right now, let's see if someone put a question in. No, they're just putting in links, which is great.
okay. So I'll go
Yeah,
ahead with this
go
handout, and if
ahead.
you have something for me, Jody, let me know.
Yeah, I will.
So this handout is in your folder, is in the folder. And that's sort of cool. I had my husband work for the government longer than I did. And so he had a few disagreed with a few things on this list. I welcome you to do that too. But this was my best effort. And that is just what do we call it in the government and what do they call it in business? And there's so for example, one of the things that I thought was an interesting one was about halfway down the page, you see regulation. Um, that's in government that they might call it compliance or compliance requirement or something along that kind of thing. Again, a policy for the government might be a guideline or a rule for a government. Um, constituent, businesses usually don't call their customers constituents because they're really not. It's their customers, their clients, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at these, you have if I know I'm bouncing around the page, but if you look at mission, mission is something that there's both in government and in public and private organizations. Okay. All right. It just doesn't. Okay. All right. I talked a moment ago about transferable skills. And if I don't give you good enough explanation here for you to take it away to understand what your transferable skills are, I hope you'll drop me a line and I'll try and do better. But basically, you have experiences from life, um, from jobs, et cetera, that you can take from one place to another. I remember many years ago I met somebody in a professional organization. I was a marketing major. So I was in a marketing association and I met somebody and she said, "Oh, I used to be a Montessori teacher and I use those skills every single day." So there you go. She was some bigwig in politics. So I get that. We could use more preschool teachers now, as far as I can tell. But anyway, they tend to be nice to each other, among other things. But it's worth your time, or I'm advocating that you take the time to think about what those transferable skills are. And you don't have to have gotten them from your job. You could get them from volunteering, from internships, from schools, even from things you did with friends. The point here is, how do they apply to a job that you may want to get? And I do, as you encounter people who are younger and with less work experience, they may very well have transferable skills. I have a friend who does resume writing, and she had somebody come to a class and he said, "I have nothing. I have absolutely," was a young person. He said, "I have absolutely nothing, but for the last 5 years, he had been taking care of an elderly relative. I don't know who it was, doesn't matter. And he'd done all these things that nurses' aides do, taking temperatures and bathing and da 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 da." And so they wrote him a perfectly lovely resume because he did have those skills. He'd been doing it for a long time and he wanted to go to, nurses' aid school or whatever. And as I note on the bottom here, your best strategy with your transferable skills, and this is thinking work and hard work, is to think about how your skills and experience are going to be solutions to the challenges of employers or the needs of employers. And just like this young man who said, "I have nothing, I've just stayed home caring for a relative," in fact had plenty if he could think about it that way. And I encourage you to do the same. Okay?
And we have a couple of really good questions. Can I ask them too?
Sure, sure.
Okay, great. First one is, can you address psychology of leaving a mission-oriented career to go to money-making oriented business? I regret having to turn my back on public service because that was a core part of my identity. Maybe look to nonprofits or education areas. That's the first question. That's a very important
Excellent.
question. Hmm.
Excellent. Yes. Do you want one at a time or two at a
Well,
time?
that's all. That's one. So
Right.
address that, and then I have another one.
Good. I don't want to get confused. Okay. I was a business major, but I'm really bleeding heart liberal ever since I can remember. And so I went to business school, and one of the things that sort of shocked me, this is relevant, by the way, is that businesses are doing things to meet the needs of their customers. They want, and again, try and rid your mind at the moment of the billionaires and the talk and the this and that and the other thing. But these people have developed a product, an innovation, a service in order to make the lives of their customers better. And they don't spend every day thinking it better be money. And and so what I'm saying to you is, yes, there are organizations that all they do is think of money, 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 money. But there are others where, while you're selling a product or a service, it's a product or service that really will help someone. And and what comes to mind now, and I could do better probably with more time, but say, for example, you're a nursing, working with a nursing agency. Sure, you're making money doing that, but you are filling a very important need for the people who need you, the people who have to go to work while they need someone taken care of. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think so. And
And I think,
mhm.
yeah, and all these people, I'm always impressed by this, that people come up a lot of time you hear of these very young people who come up with a something like a water purifier that you can use with no electricity. I'm making this up. No electricity when they're, somewhere in the world where the water isn't clean. And yes, there'll probably be money with that. But that doesn't mean it's not making them feel good about what they're doing to help the world.
And one of our for gateway volunteers, Jack, says that many private sector companies engage in corporate social responsibility, making
Yes,
grants to make
yes,
people's lives better, volunteering, or giving a
absolutely.
product or service away for free. Think pharmaceutical company that gives free meds to low income people.
Right. And the Gates Foundation or Carter's Foundation. One of my former daughter-in-law was accepted into the program that the Gates Foundation started. You'd pay $25 either a semester or the whole thing, and you could go to school at Montgomery College. This was for high school dropouts. Go to school at Montgomery College, get your high school diploma, get your associate's degree. I never did find out if it was 25 a semester or 25 for the whole thing. It doesn't matter. It was a charitable event, and there were people working there making sure that these things happened. They were very careful. They were very data oriented. But look at, it was a wonderful thing. So I
And we have
really
an
agree with you.
right. And now we have another question. Do you recommend changing the language from agency to company, for example, when writing your accomplishment?
You might go with organization
Mm, okay.
or company. You can, but I think you've got to hang on to the truth. And I think my translation guide, which is much longer than what you saw on the page, might help you and you can look it up. But you're going to still have where you worked on your resume, but when you're writing your accomplishments and such, then you're um then I think you need to you can talk about the organization, the committee, the this, the that,
Mhm.
without always saying it was, your agency.
And if you are really interested in continuing like your mission driven work, if it's still in the public sector arena, there is
Yes,
local governments, there's your state government, entities that have provide service.
right.
So that is also another great way to kind of make that transition away from the federal sector into maybe another the local government or state government.
I think there's another thing too, and that is this is my opinion, worth what you're paying for it, which is nothing. But I believe that some of these big philanthropic organizations are going to be taking on more of some of the things that are being cut by government. We've heard a little so far, but it's my guess that some of these organizations that are not run by the very loud billionaires are going to quietly come in and do and take over things and pay for things, etc. And there'll be jobs because to even give away money, to get money from the Gates Foundation, this is 10 years ago, but I bet it's the same. And for any other, you had to apply, with a whole, kind of procurement process or application process. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's great. And if people are saying higher ed is another area to look
Yes,
into, uh, you know,
somebody I
um,
talked to yesterday talked about higher ed, and
mhm.
I absolutely agree about that.
And people are putting sites in the chat. So people like public service is your gig, or ASEA, ASAE is for association roles, and idealist is for mission
Exactly.
driven role. So take a look in chat because you guys are a wonderful resource for one another and support. So
Exactly.
mhm.
And we're still in DC, and there's still a lot of cool stuff going on around here.
Yes,
So,
yeah,
and I don't think the international world is gone. It's been beaten to death, but I don't know that it's gone. I hope not. Absolutely. But I do think it's going to be creativity. I think the research and that kind of stuff is going to be pivotal. And
Mm,
as much as many of us don't really like to network, and that's a dirty word to some, if you can get out and talk to people who are doing things that still have their jobs, etc., you might find out where these little fledgling plants or seeds have been planted that
mm,
may turn into opportunities. Because I think people are horrified about what's going on in the areas in which they worked and they cared about. And and that I can talk personally from my own family with, NIH and USAID, but you can spread your arms a lot bigger than that. And I think, from adversity like this does come creativity, come, entrepreneurship. Hard to
mhm,
imagine right now, though, but I think it's worth watching.
mhm. Yes, thank you,
Again,
Ann.
my opinion. So. And I don't
Uh,
have any power about anything. But anyway, um, so that's comforting, I'm sure. Okay. I just made this list for you, just for kicks, because I think, not that these are funny, but that I was looking up what are some of the transferable skills that you might have from government experience. So this is for you just to look at that you might use in the private sector. Project management, everybody does that. Regulatory compliance, as much as we may be getting rid of regulations and this and that, still there are going to be roles, safety roles, among other things, that still have to happen. They may not happen as much, but um, stakeholder management and public relations, communications, believe me, it's not going anywhere. Data analysis, budget management, crisis management. I think people are being called upon to do that every single day, perhaps every hour. Um, Strategic planning still exists. And those, it's your job to really tease out the kinds of things that you did when you were doing these kinds of things to make it, to make them work. I led the migration of one of NIH's institute websites. Well, we were doing a lot of quality assurance. We were doing a lot of testing. We were doing a lot of user testing, a lot of background research. All of those things happen for any website. We weren't selling anything, but we wanted people to get what they came for. So, and I think you all have examples for yourselves too. All right, onward and upward. So, as far as I'm now going into the practical information about what to do now. And again, I said these phases are, um, yeah, some of them are interchangeable, some of them aren't. But one of the things you do need to do is to assemble information about yourself. Um, do research on, if you have an interview now, do the research on that organization and others that might interest you. You can do this by checking online and networking, etc. But the one you may not have done before is to collect information and create personas of hiring managers and others who might interview you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. That's an AI thing. Don't turn off your radio because it's kind of interesting. Okay, let's start with gathering information. It might be when I got laid off many years ago, I took the Myers-Briggs for the first time. And I don't know if you've ever taken that assessment, or I don't think you do it in Gateway. But anyway, it's fun. These things are interesting. And I'm not making light of how stressful it is to be in a situation of needing to look for a job right this minute. But to the extent you can, try and figure out those things, those experiences, those times at work when you felt excited, you felt interested, you felt like you were doing your best, etc. And these are the kind of things you're going to need to talk about at interviews, but also talk about with yourself about what it is you're looking for next. Okay, so we'll talk a little more about that. Okay. So I developed this tool, and it is not a tool to really, and you have this in your in the handouts. And that is the idea is to start collecting and jotting down. This is not a form that you can fill with reams of information, but to take, if you have a job you're being interviewed for, look at the job requirement and see what it is are they looking for. When did I do that? When did I do it in a job, or when did I do it as a volunteer? And then what are the outcomes and the accomplishments that show that you're absolutely wonderful at that? Um, so that is just a tool for you to use. You can use it on, my view on it is you can use the computer, you can put it on paper, you can use crayons, whatever. This is really a thinking exercise, and it's not writing these things out as accomplishments, but rather identifying them so that so you can come back to them and work with them. Another piece, and remember I said preparation is key earlier in the session. Um, that you do research, and you all did ONET yesterday. Um, and oh, those of you in Career Gateway, I'm sorry. For those of you who don't know ONET, I've given you the URL online. It's worth checking out. These are all ways that you can do research. You can look at LinkedIn, you can look at Glassdoor, and for those of you who are not familiar with Glassdoor, it's evolved a little bit, but Glassdoor is a website where people post their opinions about working places. So but I will say when I first used it, it was much easier to get to the information. Now they make you set up an account and then they chase you and bug you and et cetera, et cetera. So may not be worth the effort, but it might. I looked up an employer. I wish I'd had it. I took a job once. Oh my God, it was awful. And I wish somebody had told me. I didn't know. But you can use contacts and that kind of stuff, Glassdoor. But remember, on something like Glassdoor and any place that rates anybody, they're the people who answer those things are the people who are very, very happy and very, very sad. The middle of the roaders who don't feel strongly about it aren't answering, and they may be the majority. Um, and so I was talking to my husband about this last night, and he said he didn't know what a pain point was. And basically, what a pain point motivators are, we talked about motivators are the some of the things that make the employers want to hire, motivate you to take a step. Pain points are those areas that are causing you trouble. They're challenging your ability to do the work you want to do as an organization. So it's a good idea to look at them. And I like the example. I'm sorry, this happened at Red Lobster, but that's a pain point. Somebody screwed up big time. This is the story about that they put out a marketing campaign that bankrupted them. That's a pain point. Those people who are looking for new marketing people and communications people and planning people are going to be darn careful that they don't repeat the debacle of putting out a promotion that bankrupted the company. So, any questions about that? And also, I'm going to propose to you that you might use AI, you might use artificial intelligence, but for the longest time, um, we we did a lot of this stuff by hand. We didn't have ChatGPT. When I went to graduate school and I needed to do research to find out trends in an industry or, what was happening in a business or whatever, there was uh, there was no art a technical way to push a few buttons and get the information. Yes, you can use Google or a search engine. These days, Google almost looks old-fashioned, and I'm talking about Google and Bing and all those. But you can use AI, and this is one of those areas where it might be magic. It might look like magic. And so I used a prompt here that says, create a table. I have an organization in mind, and I said, create a table that includes information that I want about a particular company. And these are some of the things I wanted information about. And then I, pressed a button and then it happened. you could, this is just instructions. You have this in in your packet. This is instructions, but it populated a chart like this with 4 columns and that kind of stuff. Important thing to remember about artificial intelligence is it lies. So you want to be sure that one, I suggest you put your queries and your prompts into more than one. And I always ask for links. And give me a link so I'll know what you said is true. Any questions about that?
Yeah, and someone asked if you could go back to the transferable skill slide. I just wanted to look
Yes.
at it. Okay.
Okay.
Just
Oops.
quickly, they said.
I
Um,
know I went quicker than I was planning to.
and okay.
This one or I have two
They just
transferable.
said go back to the transferable skill. They would have questions on their transferable skills.
Okay.
And again, everyone, these PowerPoint presentation will be available to you. So you
Yeah.
will be able to see any of this at your leisure. Um, so someone, okay, I'm just looking because these are, okay,
Could be this one too. One of these two.
okay, okay. Um, and I'm just seeing if there's any other, okay. Um, okay, about each company's hiring managers, do their websites always list their hiring managers?
No, no, you may have to do some research. I'm going to pop ahead here on to this one to answer that question.
Okay,
One suggestion is to go to LinkedIn or, LinkedIn isn't the king anymore, but it's pretty good in terms of trying to find people. Um, but no, you can ask if you have a recruiter or somebody's called you, you can ask who it is. Maybe they'll tell you, maybe they won't. But this is a tool you can use this is a way to use AI to help you get a better understanding of the persona, the person who's hiring you. And I'm advocating here using a persona. And when I was talking to my husband last night, he didn't know what a persona is. So, and I don't know how many of you do, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. A persona in the worlds that I've worked in marketing and in usability is that you create a fictional person who has the characteristics that you think your client or whatever has, and then you try and test ideas based on that person's persona. In your handouts, I made a persona for a federal employee called Camille. And we're not really going to talk about her very much, but she's in there if you want to see what a persona is. Um, the the prompt that I was using to find out more about the hiring manager, this is after you've tried LinkedIn and and you haven't gotten anything, say. Um, then you can you can put in a prompt that says, act like a job seeker who's aiming for a X position within X company and say, and this is you're making it up. Hiring manager would be whatever, 45 years old, have a degree in business, have a salary of such and such. What are their biggest concerns? What are their hiring priorities? And you will probably get good information. Is it 100% true? Probably not, but it'll give you an idea. So you also can use other prompts like these on the screen here that you could ask. What are current trends and what are challenges, et cetera, et cetera. Again, remember I said do this in more than one place. If you have people to talk to, that's even better. But this can give you an idea of who it is you're going to be talking to. And the more you can flesh out the details about in your prompt, the better it is. I just thought this was pretty helpful and magical. So I did one, and this one is in your uh this is in your handouts. And it has 5 pages, of which the first one is here. But so basically, I fed it this. The person's the director of human resources, a business major. This is a salary. The job is competitive counsel director. Again, I found one and I found that and I anonymized it. So, so what are his key concerns? He wants leaders in his organization to deliver immediate results. He wants these are the things he wants in the next the forward in his organization. He wants to manage budget concerns, etc., and balance stakeholder expectations. So what he wants most is he wants someone who's going to come in and immediately work, who's going to be a leader without having a bunch of drama, and has a business development mindset and operational excellence. Well, I don't know exactly what that means, but I have a whole page and a half more that gives me more detail about this. That was the output of my prompt. And again, you can see it. It includes questions that you might ask in the interview. It talks about the priorities, the challenges, and that kind of stuff. So I suggest you take a look and see. But again, remember that when I was in business school, and I refuse to tell you when that was, but it's a while ago, we didn't have anything like this. We were making up, just like you're making up with AI, a persona. And we gave them a name, we gave them pictures, and I was, I've been writing my own for years. But I suggest to you that it might be fun and interesting to try this with taking what you know about the person who's hiring for a position you're going for. Okay?
And there's a couple of questions.
Yep.
Someone said, where did what Tom wants list come from? Is this a guess?
No, it was generated by AI. It was ChatGPT.
Okay. Um, okay. Someone said Anna's mentioning about handouts. Where can I access them? Their folder was sent to you when during your thank you for registering. It is also we put it in the chat. I'll put it in again. And it will be available. The folder for all the handouts, including the PowerPoint presentation, will be available on our JCA workshop website.
I'm gonna
So
try and get to it, but I don't know if I
okay,
can.
don't worry. I'll put it in for you, Ann.
Okay.
Don't forget. Don't worry.
Okay.
And then someone, what are the options to LinkedIn to gain information about hiring managers?
I'm
Um,
just
yeah.
um can you all see my screen? I have my persona on it. Here, hold on.
Now we see you.
Okay, let's see. Here's my persona. Um okay.
Okay.
So,
Yep. Hiring manager. Yep. We see
okay,
it.
so that's just the first page. So if you go here, expected interview questions by the interviewer, just questions they might ask you, um, other team members, etc. These are technically specific questions. So this was just one prompt, and I didn't go back very often, very much, but these are things to give you ideas to get into the head of the hiring manager. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And this is in your folder. Okay.
Okay, I'm seeing it. Does it make sense to get what is it, a PMP certification?
I can't answer that question. Um, all I can say to you is that's the kind of thing you can find out in your research. It's a lot of work to do one, and it's a lot of work to do one, and you've got to be sure that it's going to be a selling point to the kinds of people and organizations that you want to. Oops. I realize I'm not sharing here, am I? Um, Um, it just depends. It just depends. I know that's a cop-out answer, but anyway,
Go ahead.
but it's a cop-out answer that's true. I did an MBA because I was a liberal arts major and I kept getting laid off from my jobs over and over and over again. It was painful. And I said, that's it. Those business majors aren't getting laid off all the time. I'm gonna, I'm gonna be one of those. And I really like it. I liked it. I'm glad I did. But I didn't do very much research on it, and I should have. And I should have. Okay.
Take it away.
So onward and upward. So let's
Hmm.
talking about preparing. So I don't want to give you answers or tell you a bunch of stuff you already know. So I'm picking out things that I think you may or may not already know or could use refreshing. So I'm not going to be able to see a show of hands, but I bet many of you have heard of the STAR approach to writing your to writing accomplishments. So I hope someone's nodding. And that is um, STAR: situation, task, action, results. So I just learned this one, which has been around for a while. There are a bunch of them. You should use the ones you like best. I'm going to introduce you to CART. If you hate it, you never have to see it again. I'm also going to talk about some common questions like tell me about yourself, what are your strengths and weaknesses, and an important one, why did you leave your last job? Um, Behavioral questions, those are the questions that say tell me about a time when, and salary compensation is. So I thought I'd go through those unless we have a bunch of protests. Okay.
So,
So this is probably the most important thing I'm going to say to you today. And that is, and this, I was stunned to learn this actually, that stories, and I'm not talking about bedtime stories for kids, I'm really talking about anecdotes. When you talk about something that happened, they're remembered up to 22 times more than facts alone. And in the teeny tiny writing at the bottom of the slide is a link to the study of that. Okay. Stories light up more parts of your brain and all that story. So the kinds of stories that you need to tell in an interview, as you're talking to people, are stories about your accomplishments, your successes, your strengths and your weaknesses, times when you led a team or you increased sales or you went above and beyond or you improved this or that. Those are the kinds of stories that I suggest that you talk about. Anyway, so my message to you is for those of you who remember Joe Friday, we're not listening to him. Um, so I'm going to talk about CART. When you use the CART approach, hold on a minute. CART is challenge, action, results, and tie back. And what I think makes this approach just the best is the tie back part. Because for all the others, you say, well, this is what happened as a result. But in this approach, I'm suggesting that you come back and say, and this is why I can help you with that. This is how this accomplishments relates to the job I'm talking to you about. So that's why I think it's important. So basically, when you're going to do a cart story, you have to decide, obviously, what skill you're going to talk about and choose a career story that highlights your skills and experience, and then just use that to tell a story. So this handout is in your folder, and it's actually got something on the front of it. It's a 3-page handout that I gave you, and that I think you can fill it out. It may be helpful. This is the one I wanted you to see because this is the cart. This is the cart part. So basically, what this form asks you to do is to say, what is the requirement? What's on that job description that you're going to be talking to? Might be customer service, it might be project management, it could be whatever. So you basically explain what it was that, why, who are we and what are we doing here? And as you can see here, this is not a big, long great American novel. And since I know many of you can't see it, I'm just going to say, after many years, the organization approved and needed to disseminate information about a new label for food, etc. And so the action was had a bunch of meetings with people, decided on the label, tried to figure out how to disseminate it, and there was a focus here to reaching underserved communities. So we talked about that. So we created toolkits and fact sheets and this and that and the other thing. And the accomplishment was we reached 10 million people And the tie back is this job would require me to oversee production of digital and print materials with a focus on accessibility, inclusion, and impact. And this is the one of the many initiatives I did when I uh, when I was working in my previous job to do that. So again, I'm not saying this the way you'd say it in an interview, but you get the point. I've done it here. I could do it for you. And I'd like to also say, as an aside, when you're interviewing, people are very fond on interviews and resumes of saying, "I'm a great communicator. I'm a great, I get along with people. I'm a team player. I'm a this and that and the other thing." It's stories like these and the ones that you create that tell an employer that you have soft skills. You probably have to go to school to learn how to be an accountant or to program. Maybe you don't. But for something like this, you can say, I'm good at stuff from here until doomsday, but this tells them that you are. You led something, you did something, it happened, it met the needs. That's telling them about you. Okay? Questions about that? All right. I'm going to move
And
on to tell. Yeah,
someone noted in the chat, they said that I'm talking about hiring managers, that
yeah,
it's important to note that they are usually in the HR department with the job of limiting the number of applicants who will be forwarded to the business unit or leadership for a second interview.
yeah,
One needs to review and analyze the job description of the posting being interviewed for and be able to speak to the technical and operational needs of the organization. I think that's very important.
absolutely. And if I didn't emphasize that enough, I would like to say here to what you just said. This is this is the idea that you know as much about that organization practically as they do. Do you have to do this if you're going to go be a cashier for McDonald's? No. But I'm assuming or Walmart. But I'm assuming that the kinds of jobs that you all are going to be going to are jobs that are sophisticated and complex and deserve the research you're going to put in. Because
Yes.
that if you walk out of an interview and they say, "Oh, it sounds like he already works here," you've
Mm,
done your job. You've done
yes.
your job. And you're
Yes.
not going to do that by not taking the time to do some of these things. Whether you use AI or personas or whatever,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's the idea of the investment that you've made to to know about that place to the extent you possibly can.
Yes. Thank you.
But I agree. Okay. So tell me about yourself. Now, I had somebody in resume reviews yesterday, and I mentioned this to her. I'm here to tell you, you have to have a response to this question. If you don't practice it or plan it ahead of time, that's your business. But I'm here to tell you that someone's going to ask you something like, tell me about yourself, or give me more information about your background, or it may not be exactly phrased this way, but this is going to be what they're going to ask for. And I suggest to you that taking the time to write something, practice something is going to be well worth the effort. And if you get to an interview where you're both staring at each other and this happens and nobody is asking you a question, you can say, "Would you like me to tell you about myself?" And there you go. So I'm not saying that you memorize this so, they push a button and you start going, but it's really important to know this very well. Okay, I hope I have you convinced by now. So I gave you a worksheet that you can use. It's in your folder. Um, I'm not going to go over it right now, but you can read it yourself. And I've also included three sample tell me about yourself responses, which I am not going to read you. But the general drift is to start with the past. If ever since I was in kindergarten, I wanted to be uh, international development worker, and it said I made food or whatever. If you can honestly say that you've had a passion or you started doing this at a long time ago or whenever you did, that is a good way to start. Doesn't have to be from the beginning of time. I started doing for me, I started doing digital analytics, web analytics in those days, way back when. Nobody had heard of it. And it caught my eye immediately. I had been doing direct marketing, and I said, digital analytics, where you find out where the people are coming from to go to your website, what they're doing, what did they search for, what did they accomplish, how long did they stay. So I was interested, I recognized that as the modern direct marketing, and I wanted to do it. And then I could go on and tell the story about there wasn't any training when I started, or there was one training. So I got all the credentials I could have, and you have a place that I could work and do it. And this is a true story. I got the job. So I have three scenarios for you. One is a young woman who was in a class I gave, and I taught how to write a tell me about yourself. And this was so good that she got three different offers and a scholarship offer. So there you go. But I'm not going to read them to you. You can get the drift. Okay? Oh, and then I created Camille, and you also have her in your and this is her. Tell me about yourself. Okay? Any questions about that? Because I'm sensitive to time here, and I want to move on.
We have there is a question which I think is important, especially for our 50 and better professionals. They wanted to know, could you please address the old notion that with a college degree or graduate degree or doctorate or whatever, you can get any job? Why are educated people unable to get any paying job to keep your bills paid? That too seems to have changed in the job market. And this is where we talk about ageism and the 50 and better population.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Um, all I can say to you is that yes, I believe the job market has changed a lot, but I think it's been a long time since when you got a degree, you definitely got a job. I mean,
Mhm.
I graduated with an MBA, and at the time MBAs were really popular. It was not easy because you really need to you really need to target. And when you say, I'll use myself as an example, knowing myself the best. As an MBA, as a marketing master's of business administration, I could have been in marketing, I could have been in finance, economics, computers, processes, blah, 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 blah. So if I needed to be able to look at those employers who needed somebody. I specialized in professional services. I needed to go to employers that wanted somebody who knew about professional services and how I could apply those skills to what they have. And it's very different, particularly in government, but everywhere. You need to be able to communicate that you can solve a problem or you can make their business better. And they're not going to do that for you.
Mhm.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. I mean, as I mean, even the notion of why we needed the career gateway, because it's a program for the professional 50 plus job seeker. Because
Right.
prior to this program, there were programs for those who had, for people who were not, because the notion was the understanding of the thought process was that if you have a degree, you can get a job.
Right.
But
Right.
things change when you hit that, as you're aging. and that's and that's why
Yes.
we have programs like this to help kind of debunk those notions of
Yeah.
ageism and try. So it's yeah.
I
um
don't think it's just ageism. I think um, because I think that there's a whole manner of things, and as job markets get tight,
yes.
then and employers get more demanding, it doesn't necessarily mean as an older person you're going to
Yes.
be thrown aside.
Right.
And so your job here is to convince somebody, I absolutely have the things you need in the
Exactly.
way you need them, that and also you know what some of the stereotypes are. One of the things that I've heard lately is that employer employers don't necessarily know an older worker knows about tech.
Right.
So one of the things I have on one of my slides is to remember to mention tech.
Hmm.
I'm just talking about like, the Google suite, or the, Word and those.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
really think that tailoring and targeting has been around for a while. And when things are as tough as they are, it's absolutely essential, no matter how
Hmm.
old you are.
Right. And here's a question, a very good question about accomplishments and how far back should we go with our accomplishments? And we say in the Career Gateway that you just because you accomplished something and it may have been 20, 25 years ago, your accomplishments do not expire.
No,
So
absolutely
you
not.
can always highlight those accomplishments because if you did it, you did it. Doesn't matter if you did it 30 years ago, 20 years
Right,
ago, that was an
right.
accomplishment.
Right. Absolutely. But this is the deal. You need to talk in terms, and this is the hard and the thinking part, in terms of what that person, and we're talking, not resumes, what that person recognizes,
Hmm.
in a way that you're talking about their problems, not, and you can say, I had a situation similar to yours, blah, blah, explaining, and then say, this is what you did. And one of the things that I say a little later is that be very, very careful if you, especially if you're using older accomplishments, to not sort of say anything like, and this is a joke, but I think you know what I mean. Way back when the dinosaurs walked the earth, you've got to be careful that you're using modern language.
Right,
That
right,
you're
and
not talking about, and you'll see a slide about, you're not talking about Rolodexes. I really miss Yellow Pages, but they're not around anymore.
right, right.
And so it's up to you to be savvy about the things that are really being used in the workplace. And you can get this from a volunteer experience or you know, um, or a paid experience or a school. But
And so,
go ahead.
yeah, someone else addressed another notion, and we addressed this in the Career Gateway as well. But talking about, you put on, I'm a lifelong learner. Well, it's great to show that you took recent certifications, or
Right.
because that keeps you current. And so, yes, you might have had your degree from 40 years ago, and political science or whatever that was,
Yeah.
which but but it is wonderful if you say, hey, I'm a lifelong learner. Well, show me, just not just tell me you're a
Yeah,
lifelong learner, but show
absolutely.
me in what way have you been a lifelong learner. Well, I've been
Exactly.
certified in this, I've gotten this, I've taken tech
Exactly.
training, blah blah blah. And those really show the employer that you've kept current, and that you are have kept up with your skill set, and that you are that you are current in today's job market. So
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah,
So,
and that you're up to date on the industry's trends and knowledge,
right.
of your right.
That's what I mean by the research.
Hmm.
Sure, AI can help you, but you need to know what are the trends right now. And unfortunately, in the world we're living in right this minute, that means you need to know every single day. I mean, yesterday the Fulbright board retired. But that was yesterday. There was something else awful the day before, or something else changed, and this with tariffs, and now they're on. And so I'm not trying to be political here, even though I know I sound like it. But what I'm saying to you is that something can change on the way to an interview that could
Hmm.
impact what's going on in that organization. So,
And there's some questions about resumes. I'm going to save that because this is really, we want to focus on
yeah,
you
we
getting
can't,
through the interview. Yeah,
I still have
but
more to do. So
yes,
I
so
would
you
love to
you
talk
go
about
go
interviews,
ahead, and then
but I
if
can't.
after the workshop, if so a couple questions want to be addressed,
Sure.
and we'll be happy to
Happy
talk
to
about
do
that.
it. Happy
Yes,
to do
so
it. Okay.
go go
A
ahead.
question that's still asked a lot is what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And I cannot emphasize it enough that you need to be ready for these questions. So you probably can think yourself about the strengths. But when you get to weaknesses, people really kind of fall all over themselves a little too often and talk about their fatal flaws and their whatever, whatever. And so and one of the things is I've been doing career services for quite a long time. And what we used to say was figure out a weakness that is not really a weakness. So, and talk to that. I work so hard. I will never let anything be, I won't let anything remain unfinished, or work all night to get meet a deadline or whatever, whatever. And what I suggest you do instead is to think of something that you had to learn because you were not doing it well enough in your job. So, in the interest of full disclosure, I will share one. And that is that I was doing digital analytics. I was doing analytics. And you would assume, of course, that I was fabulous at Excel. Well, you would have assumed wrong. I was basically doing the hunt and peck equivalent of Excel. And so I would say I didn't know Excel well enough to do the job I had. So I took all the classes that were offered at NIH at the time. I even made friends with the teacher. This is true. So if I had a question between classes, I could write to her. I started doing more and more exercises that took more, more ability and more skills. And then I was able to prepare the things I needed to with Excel and got compliments on them, and they met the needs of the organization. So, am I a horrible person? No. I have told you that I had a weakness. I have overcome it. Now I'm wonderful. I had a client who came here from Puerto Rico, where she always spoke Spanish at work. She just never, So here she was a military spouse. Well, here she is everybody speaks English, and her English was, she knew English, but she wasn't so very good at it. And so it was hard for people to understand. People were giving her negative feedback. And so she started taking classes. She also watched a lot of American television. And and basically she got better and better. And then her boss, people stopped asking her so often, to repeat things 100 million times, and she overcame it. Now it's not a problem. And what I'm saying to you is, it's not that these were not problems, but they are, you know, I don't think anybody is going to say, we are not going to hire you because 2 years ago you weren't very good at Excel. So, but I would suggest to you when you answer these questions, and you don't, you're not bragging if you talk about your strengths. Talk about your strengths, have examples, but avoid things like, I work too hard, or I'm a perfectionist. And for Pete's sake, don't say anything bad, even if they deserve it, about your previous bosses, your coworkers, or the organization. Okay? So now for the moment you've been waiting for. And that is, why did you leave your last job? And I propose to you that well, you know what the easy ones are. I got a better job. It's not easy that you got laid off or reorganized, but people understand what it is. So, but if the departure was difficult, I suggest to you again, prepare ahead of time a neutral response that you can practice until you can say it without flinching. And I mean that. So my brother-in-law got fired after, or let go, his company got bought after 39 years. And so we worked together and we came up with something he was going to say. And then I sent him off to a job fair where I said, you don't care about any of these people, so try it out. Talk to them. Use this, why did you leave your last job? So it doesn't, you're not tempting to cry or feel bad or look like someone kicked you in the stomach. The point here is facts, because if you go in and you're a little bit wishy-washy, you're inviting somebody to ask you, just keep asking you questions. So why'd that happen? Da, 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 da. You don't want to do that. You want clear, concise, boom, you're done. And it will often, for many of you, it would for me, need practice. If you were fired and for cause, then it's worth being able, again, neutral, quickly talk about in as neutral terms as you can about what you learned from that experience and what did you do to improve. Um, I have a friend who got fired for basically for performance. He was not managing his team well. So he went back and he took classes, he got mentored, he did this, he did that. It was had a heck of a job, a heck of a time finding a new job, but he did. He worked really hard at it. And now he's doing what he wanted to do. People do get fired. And I'm not talking about chainsaws. I'm talking about, for performance and such. Um, if you're leaving because my husband said to me last night, well, what do you if you can't stand the face of the person you're working for? Well, try again, think about it ahead of time. The job was not was, the direction the job was going or the project was going was not a fit. This is my career goal. I couldn't do it at that company, something along like that, along the lines of that. I had somebody who was talking a lot in a class about how she was now had custody of her granddaughter, so the schedule didn't work for her, the job she had. So she needed a new job. And she was going into my granddaughter came and da 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 da. And I said, no, no. The reason you left your last job was the schedule was not working for you. Period. Do I know this is easier said than done? Actually, I do. Okay. Comment? Anything? All right.
And I have a question for
Yes.
you. What
Yes.
if people are asking, what if you left your previous job or whatever, and then was working in the federal government, but you left your job because you were burnt out? How do you present that in an interview?
I would say you wanted something else for when, if you did anything that you left for, that would be good. Um, it's going to be hard to frame I left because, but you could say I was working 24/7 and it was not working for me. I need, or something like that. The job was not a good fit for me. It was in
Hmm.
the beginning, but it isn't now.
And other questions, what if you were forced to go, like early retirement or RIF, how do you explain that?
I think, and if we're talking about right now,
Yeah. Hmm.
I think you can say with the changes in the government, I decided to take an early retirement. I am still planning to work.
Hmm.
That's why I'm looking. And you know, I know that the politicians are, we're proud of themselves about how horribly they've been treating people. But I think it is just better to stay neutral.
Hmm.
They don't
Hmm.
know
Yeah.
what they're firing people. They never knew what that person ever did in their lives.
And you don't know the political leanings towards the people
Right.
who are
And you
interviewing
don't
you.
know. You can just
Yeah.
say my office was eliminated,
Hmm.
or there was a lot of uncertainty. I know somebody who basically said, I can't take the uncertainty anymore. And what I would say is things were changing a lot. The, what my job was changing. A lot of people left, so we had to take over other people's work.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it wasn't working for me. But I would say less is more. And I
Yes.
would say practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
Um,
Someone was saying, practicing in informational interviews or networking chats, um, definitely is a good thing, kind of
mhm.
getting that, especially for those of our federal workers who are still in that shock and awe stage. Um,
Right.
mhm.
Job fairs. If you don't,
Yes.
job fairs. And also, I mean, I've only in all the years I've been doing and it's been a while, and it was sadly a young person. I said, get a friend to interview you. She was really struggling with interviewing, just struggling. And then her friend told her she did a lousy job. I'm like,
Oh
oh my
no.
So I ended up having my she didn't know my husband, so I had my husband interview her. He was a prince. But you've got to be careful who you ask. But I think job fairs are probably the least risk that you can you can get, especially with an employer that you don't care about.
And
So,
what if you left your former position and this affects the 50 and better population more because of health issue?
the best
How,
way to, they can't ask you, but the best way to respond is to say, I had to leave because of a health issue. It's all fine now. And that's it. I don't anticipate having to, do anything special now.
yeah.
So, and
Let's see.
they're not allowed to say, what's that health issue?
Mhm.
They're,
Right. And you could
they're not
say,
allowed to do
I
that.
had a health issue. I've taken care of it. I'm now feeling good. I'm ready to come
Yep.
back to work. I've taken,
Yep.
I've taken back, and now I'm ready to work. And I'm
Right.
ready to help you in the capacity that I can make your organization, whatever,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, what if you left, some people are saying there was workplace violence, like they were teaching and they didn't feel safe. So if like if you left because of, you know,
Like,
there weren't good, it wasn't a good
right.
situation.
Right. You just don't want to invite questions because you don't want to answer them. But if you have to, you can. So what I would say to you is that if you can come up with a neutral answer that said that the workplace had become uncomfortable for me, and it seemed like the best thing I could do was to find another opportunity. You don't want to look like you're going to sue anybody.
Right.
So if you say, my boss was harassing me or something like that, yes, you can say that. And it is a good reason to leave a job. It's just employers are very frightened of people who are going to go sue them any minute.
And I would put as much as you can. If you were rift, if you were whatever, I mean,
Oh God, yes, that is
you just
out
say,
of your control.
out of your control. My position was eliminated, or
Oh yes.
or
Oh
I took
yeah.
an early buyout because
Right.
they was being, and just move on. Make it short, concise. Be prepared to answer the question. Don't get all flustered, teary eyed. Um, you know
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
you know,
Be
and that you are
you
now
just
100%
don't
ready to make this transition. And
exactly. You don't want follow-up questions if you can possibly avoid it. And so I had somebody in a class who was ta his company fired him because he wanted to leave town to go care for a sick relative. And he wanted to explain all that. And he wanted to say he had cancer and he was dying and I don't mean to sound as insensitive as I realize I sound. But what we said to him was, you don't want to share all that.
no,
That is just you had a family matter. You needed to take time off to take care of a relative. Everything is peachy deachy fine now, and I don't expect that will interfere with my work. It's got to be neutral, and you want to not, you don't want to get it. Oh, so what kind of cancer did your brother
right,
have?
right.
Yeah, and it was interesting because he felt like he wasn't being honest. And we're going, you're being honest. Trust me, honest, very. You
Less is more, and you want to be truthful, but not, you don't need to get into the details, especially particularly also if it's your own health issue. They don't need to know it. It's
right. Oh
not their
my
business.
gosh, no.
You just say
Right.
if you had health, had some surgery or whatever. You had a
Ex
health issue. You took care of it. You are now back at ready to work. But
exactly.
they don't need to know. Um, um, oh,
And in
someone asked Anne, how do you define neutral?
sorry.
How do you define
Oh, how do
neutral?
I define it? I'm sorry. Neutral is no he said, she said. It wasn't their fault. You're using neutral language. Like, for example, you wouldn't say, my boss was sexually harassing me, so I left. Okay.
Right.
Uh, that may be why you left, but that isn't what you're sharing at this point. And that, because again, you don't want the follow-up question. You don't want the follow-up question and questions. And because then you could dig yourself a hole and not mean it. So what I mean by neutral is you want, and again, this one I truly believe you have to think about ahead of time. I mean, with my brother-in-law, we practiced. We practiced. And he could very much explain it in a neutral way. Company got bought out. They decided not to keep the old staff. End of conversation. It hurt my feelings a lot. They were
Right.
total jerks about it, et cetera, et cetera. But tell me that, not them.
And Jennifer had a great you know, how did she put it? Let me see. I'm just looking. I mean, oh, she said, add on the positive, be positive in your neutral response of being riffed, that you now have the space to follow your dreams and take a new role. Sound excited when you say it. I think that is just perfect.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Exactly. I'm taking this as an opportunity
Yes,
to look in,
to
to
pursue something
pursue something.
my passion or something I've always
Right.
wanted to do, and I
Exactly.
feel I can help your company X, Y, and Z because I have the
Exactly.
skill set, and this is what I can do for you. Employers
Exactly.
want to hire you. The thing that they're most concerned about is not, oh, why you took time off, why this and that. They want to know, what can you do for me, and how can you make my job easier?
Right. Exactly.
you know, and if you,
Exactly. And that's really, really important. You know,
hmm
um the thing is, this may be as painful as a day is long, and I think it must be what so many people are going through right now. But in it all, there is an opportunity. And it may be scary as all get out. You may, have all sorts of challenges, but like it or not, you have a situation that was completely out of your control. And now you're looking at what are the things that I can do that will that will help you, help your company, help your organization. And I would careful not, this is a hang up question with a skilled interviewer that you could end up, talking about, I don't know, whatever. And like my friend who wanted to go on and on, or my student, on and on and on and on about why he decided to leave and they fired him and blah, blah, blah. And, if that comes up, then you can deal with it. But the truth is, he needed to be home. He took a leave, and that's what he did. And as soon as he was done, he's back to work.
and this individual says that they now have caregiver responsibilities. Should they mention this at all in the interview? It does limit their hours and flexibility. Like, for instance, they might prefer remote work, and they might ask, "Why do you want remote work?" Should they talk about their caregiver responsibilities?
I would say to you, if you want remote work, because remote work works for you, the time you want to talk about that, and I'm getting a little concerned about time here, folks.
Okay,
Yeah.
I won't
The
ask any
time
more questions after this one until you finish.
I don't, I'm happy to do it, but I won't get to that. But the time you want to talk about remote work and alternatives with hours and stuff is when they think you are the best thing since sliced bread. And when they think they will do anything possible to get you, that's when you talk about it.
Okay,
And not before.
all right,
And not before. If you
great.
could possibly avoid it.
Okay,
Somebody is allowed to ask you a question that says, will you be able, sorry about the candy in my mouth, but it seemed better than coughing, or cough drop. Um, th th they can and they are legally allowed to say, is there anything that'll get in your way of coming to work on time every day from 8 to 5? They can ask that. What they want to know is whether you have kids or whatever responsibilities. But you don't have to answer it that way. So, anyway, onward and upward.
yep.
All right. I'm going to quickly go over behavioral questions. If people have questions, you can contact me. Excuse me. These are the questions like, tell me about a time when you had a conflict or you couldn't meet a deadline or you were assigned a big task and you had no training. So the point the point with a behavioral interview is that you can actually probably do a pretty good job of guessing what kind of thing they're going to ask you by, not always, of course, by looking at the job description. And if anybody's told you anything, but you can see what they say the priorities are for the job and and sort of see what kinds of things they may say. Fast paced, everybody's all hands on deck, big deadlines. If they talk about that kind of things, must be a good time manager, must, multitask, which of course no one can do. But those are, if that's what's in the job description, you can think about the kinds of typical behavioral questions, responses that you are going to need to think of. You don't need to think of one for every single thing, but it's the idea that, um, you didn't get along with a coworker. Yes, my coworker and I did not see eye to eye on this. We sat down together, we figured out what the problem was, we figured out a solution, and everything's peachy peachy now. And um and that's the thing. You want to talk about what you did and what you learned. It's the same as the weaknesses question. What did you learn and what did you do about it? Uh, um, and you don't have to dwell, you don't have to say they hired the biggest bitch I've ever seen to be my boss, and it was all her fault that I, you know, that I didn't come to work every day on time. You know what I'm saying? Again, I realize this sounds like a whole lot of work, but you can read between the lines sometimes and find out what they may ask you and think about what you would say. I would like to think about the awful person that had worked, came in and bossed me around and didn't listen to me and all that stuff, but n- not the time or place. I found that, or a popular one is two equal level bosses came to you and needed something and both couldn't be done. And so I talked to each of them, tried to get them to talk to each other, and we decided the best approach. Those are positive human answers. And if they say, "Oh, we would never want you to do that," then you got to wonder about the organization. Okay? Um, So this is what I was saying before. You can do some predicting of behavioral questions. You can research the organization. If the say you read in the literature that their stuff isn't getting delivered on time or their services aren't up to par or something like that, you can start thinking to yourself about what might be issues on the personnel level that they might want to be sure that you're not going to have, problems. Okay. All right. So I didn't want to miss this one because I still have a lot more to say. All right. Salary. One of the things that's really important about salary, and this, I had somebody in my, as a resume review person yesterday, and I said, you're going to hear this tomorrow so you can sleep through this part. Um, what's really, really important about salary negotiation is that if you do not negotiate, you probably will leave money on the table. And I would like to amend my slide to say money or benefits or something. Okay? May not only be money. I've got a few screenshots of some of the salary and salary sites, but you have a real advantage now because you truly can, in some cases, find out the appropriate salary range or the salary range that company is probably going to use. You might not, but you might. And so one um, important task is to figure out what you think the salary is going to pay. One of the or what the company is going to pay. But one of the issues these days, there's somebody's probably back there going, and there's salary transparency. I don't know about you, but a lot of times salary transparency says we're going to pay between 80,000 and 320. That tells me nothing. Okay? Nothing. So if you have a real salary transparency, great. But I do suggest that you, one, see what you can find on some of these sites, LinkedIn, what are people paying for the job you're applying for, stuff like that. You also need to decide what salary and benefits you want, including things that you absolutely are unwilling to give up. And I was talking to somebody yesterday about a job that is very, very likely to pay less than she was paid before. Because if you go out of the government and you've been in the government for a while, you just might not get what you've got now. But those are the things you need to think about. And I would always say to you to go to an interview to get the offer. And I will say that now. You can decide later not to take it. But I suggest to you that you go for the offer no matter what, even if the salary isn't what you think it ought to be. Okay, so you spend time. So one of the things that to think about in we're not just talking about salary, we're talking about compensation. There are non-financial ways to be compensated. And so, for example, schedule is as good a one as any. You know, Maybe you need to drop off kids or grandkids or somebody, and you can't get to the office at 8:30, but you can get there at a quarter of 9. But that's something you need to negotiate. These days, hybrid work or remote work is a hot button. Not everywhere. There are a lot of companies that are like, the heck with you, government. We're going to do, our people love hybrid and remote work. We're going to do it. If you're not getting a salary that you want, you can also ask for an early performance review with a salary, revisiting salary. Another thing you might ask for is like professional dues for professional associations. I don't know if you can do that. I think you can in government. Pay for conferences, pay for training, pay for tuition, that kind of thing. But it may not work, and then you will have to make a decision about whether this is the right thing for you. But be aware that um, that you should have things up your sleeve that will make you happy if the finances won't quite work the way you want them to. I'm not saying to take that job. I'm just saying to be smart when you walk in. So everybody says, when you talk about salary, pretty much everybody says that don't talk about salary until the end. Just don't do it. If they ask you, don't answer. And I'm here to tell you that most people don't know how or are unwilling. If someone says, what is the salary you're looking for? They can answer very nicely and say, well, I'd much rather talk about salary when I know more about the job and how I'd fit in or what I could do. And I'm not being facetious here. That's what I think you ought to try and do and say, can we talk about this when we know more about, what you need and what I have and stuff. But sometimes they will not do that. They will not postpone the conversation. So at that point, you need to be ready with a range. And remember that you are likely never to get more than the bottom of your range. So keep that in mind. I do suggest that if you can delay the salary conversation, by all means do it. Another way to approach it is if they say, what are your salary requirements? You can say something like, what are the salary ranges for this position, or what are salary bands, or what's budgeted to pay? But sometimes you will just not get that power and try and take it back when they want it, but I cannot promise you. And the other thing is that a lot of people complain when they go to classes about how to negotiate a salary is they say, the person who's teaching says, if you do this, 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 and this, then you will get, the highest possible salary. It may or may not work that way in the situation you're in. So go with the trends here. Postpone as long as possible. Be ready to talk about the value you're going to bring. Be ready to negotiate if that's the situation you're in. But I can almost guarantee you that nobody out there teaching salary negotiation can tell you exactly how it's going to go until you get there. So, any more questions about that? Okie dokie. Okay, this is more on salary research. I'm gonna skip past these um, so that you can look at them. This is just one of the salary sites, salary.com. I put the URLs. This is another one, Salary Expert. Their report. I put in the made up stuff to see what they'd say. This is another one from Monster. So this is the kind of thing that's out there. I mean, when I first started this, we had nothing. We had nothing. Okay.
Oh, and someone did say
Yeah,
there are a couple of, can you negotiate salary higher than the range stated in the job description?
you can try. You, you can try.
But
Um,
don't be surprised if they say, that's it.
yeah, I mean there are realities, but sure, you may be viewed as gutsy. And it just might be that you can convince them I have this, this, and this, and therefore I'm looking for a higher salary. Go for it.
And someone said for salary and compensation, should I bring up what I had in the government?
I think you can. A lot of times salaries are dependent on what you were paid before, but that really depends on the organization. Like, for example, county and state probably pay less than you got in the government. Governments, I mean.
Mm-hmm. And this is an interest, which if you were RIF, but you were able to retain your health life insurance benefit, you could negotiate a higher salary in exchange for not receiving the company health life insurance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there are, be creative. I don't know if I mentioned it in this class or not, but I wanted a job. They were not going to pay me the salary I wanted, but I negotiated an extra week of vacation. Now the
Mm-hmm.
boss has become a friend and she still laughs about that. She said we were so stunned, we didn't know what to do. So,
Lots of application sites screening interviews require a specific number. A lot of sites don't have info on types of jobs we've done, might be seeking. So research isn't really helpful how to handle that. You could, in that instant, in an application, our facilitator, Elise, says put $1, because they know,
oh,
so that you can complete the application.
right.
And
You don't want to get stuck. Yeah.
you don't want to get like it, and they know that obviously you're not going for $1. And so,
No.
that is something you
Yeah,
could talk about.
I hadn't heard that.
Hmm.
So, yeah, if you possibly can say negotiable, but you may, especially in these days and age, this day and age where companies are getting thousands of resumes and applications. So their job is not as much looking at your resume as managing this, you know, volcano
Right,
of
right.
applications.
This is
So,
this is a good question, and I can answer it.
sure.
Should you only apply for a job only if you match 100% of everything they want, or is it worth the
The
effort to try if you are missing a couple of things that they say they want? Apply. Because
uh
if you that is kind of a wish list of an employer. There's no candidate that
Yes.
matches
Oh, yes.
100%.
The somebody I respect a lot says if you have 70 to 80% apply.
Yeah. And
So,
the skill set that you have, if they say, and if they're like saying, because you don't want to be, if they say they want this certificate, and you have something that is similar to that certificate, say I am certified in whatever it is, which is similar
yes.
to the certificate that you want, so
Right.
that you will not be kicked out of
It's
the ATS
yeah.
system.
Yeah.
Always,
Yeah.
you should mention the certifications that they want. If you have certifications, if you don't have those certifications, or if you're getting the training, you could say, I am getting this, I will be certified in that, in X, Y, and Z, you know, um, put that in your resume. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The problem with all the automation is that
Hmm.
does take, some of the personal touch. And let me just say this, you are likely to be much more successful if you put in an application on the website of the hiring organization, not on for example, if you find something on LinkedIn, but it's at Geico, for example, go to Geico's site.
And this is, we're
Um,
still trying to stick to interviewing. This
yeah.
person says, I actually want a job with less responsibility and I'm willing to take a far smaller salary than my federal job. How do I explain that to employers in an interview?
I think you can if they ask you, I think you can say um that I've decided that I'd like to be that uh I'm looking for a position that that requires fewer hours and more, that I think you can just say I'm at a point here that I have done the high-powered, high visibility job, and now I'm ready to do something else that's a little bit less intense.
Okay, I'm not going to ask, I want you to get through, so go ahead.
Okay,
Those are great
so
questions, though.
I'm assuming the mic will be the call will be open when we're done. Okay, I just
Yes.
want you to appreciate my cartoon here about where's Waldo. The question it asks is where's Waldo going to be in 5 or 10 years or something, which I love. Anyway, so we talked about some of these things when you're actually at the interview. I really did talk about these already. Be sure you're active, you're engaged, you have eye contact, whether you're on Zoom or whether you're in person. Um, and I just have heard through the professional association a lot that there are assumptions sometimes about older people that they don't know how to use technology. You don't want to say how much you hate Zoom. You don't want to say, I'll give you a carbon copy of that. Okay, so and my favorite is I did that when the dinosaurs walked the earth. Um, but don't do that either. So, uh, I think another important thing here is why did that do that? Why did that do that? Okay. So, I'm suggesting you practice your responses, your stories, etc. I think you know I want you to do that. One of the things is to remember is that a lot of times people are a little nervous when they get to an interview and they don't quite hear the question. I had a client who just would take off, and 5 minutes later, she had talked about the room she had chemistry class in high school. So you don't want to do that. Try and be sure you understand the question. If you're not sure what they're asking, ask. Um, Try and tailor the responses to the job. So if they say to you, where will you be in 5 or 10 or 15 years? No, you don't want to say retired and sitting on a beach. Use, answer in terms of the job. You should have a ready answer for why do you want to work here. It might very well be something similar to what you put into your tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work here? You all are known to be a blah, 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 blah. That's why I want to be here. And since we're concerned with, I'm so sorry, with age discrimination and this and that, be aware of what they're not allowed to ask. But what I would say to you is to think of the intent of the question. If someone asks you a question, for example, if you're in a warm-up situation and somebody says, you're just establishing rapport, they might say, oh, do you have kids? Or they may have, paintings, their walls are festooned with kid art. Um, they may be trying to get to know you. Just be careful. Be careful. I suggest to you that you don't, if somebody asks you a question they shouldn't, as I said to you, my goal is for you to get an offer. And I don't think it's a good idea to stand up in the middle of the interview and say, I am going no further because you just asked me a question that was illegal and I refuse to answer. Storm, storm, storm. Go for the offer, then say no. You have very, very effectively wasted money and time for them if you do that. So, you're not sure of your family plans. You haven't, you don't know what's going to happen about your life. You don't have to answer those questions. but I would suggest that being polite and evasive and not have them know you're evasive is the best way to go. So I don't know if you remember when that flight attendant, said I quit and came down the slide of the airplane. I don't think you should do that in a job interview, if you're asking my opinion. So very quickly on the finish and follow up. Oh my goodness, I'm out of time. I'm sorry. Um, Before you buy, be sure you have thought of some questions that you've either asked during the interview or prompted by things they've said, but bring some with you. This is going to save you a lot of heartache if it works, and that is try and find out what the next steps are in the hiring process. Because otherwise you're not going to know, and if that can be crazy making. Um, you also, before you leave, check in with the interviewer and say, is there anything else you want to know? And if you possibly can, make a plan for follow-up. May I call you if I haven't heard in 2 weeks, etc. Um, Also, send one form or another of a thank you. You all who are government people know that if you actually write a real thank you note, like one with a design on the front, that it'll go somewhere to get checked for anthrax, and it will be, weeks and months before it ever gets there. So you probably need to use email. But if you're not in that situation and you can send, either a letter or a card to say thank you, I think it will really be worthwhile. And we tell people this all the time, and you'd be shocked by how many employers say, "I never get thank you." It doesn't happen. So, and do try and stay in touch with the interviewer. Mhm. Anyway, that is that. I know I rushed toward the end, but I'm here to answer questions.